Welcome to you all to the second part of the Bohemian Grove episode of NEWSHOUND. This is really interesting, goes through the world of Kissinger, Nixon, Ford, all of these big players, Reagan, Bush, who all were members of the Bohemian Grove and all went there during a time where they were really the most influential people in the world, and they were shaping this global world order, this new world order that we see coming to fruition today. And what all of these characters did was they conspired behind the scenes constantly, and then we are led to believe that, questioning what they're doing at this strange event where they worship this massive owl and have all this pageantry, well, that's conspiracy theory, isn't it? But basically what eventually really puts a knife into the heart of Bohemian Grove is women. What a surprise. And the same thing that was a complaint in 1895, as you would have seen in the first part if you watched it, with the Alex Ricks article, which is amazing, that starts off that part, that news hound. That is something that really is a nail in the coffin for the integrity and the name and the future continuity of this weird, shadowy organization of these extremely powerful men, who, as you will hear, apparently both dress up nude, and run around the stage. Enjoy this second part of the Bohemian Grove. So here we go. From 1959, we go 5 years later. This is a Messenger Inquirer newspaper. Goldwater must relax at the Bohemian Club. San Francisco, Associated Press. One rigid rule for Senator Barry Goldwater to observe as a guest this weekend in exclusive Bohemian Grove is that he must relax. All he says and does will be completely off the record in the 2,600-acre Redwood retreat established in 1878 as a summer outing area for members of the Bohemian Club, one of San Francisco's most elite social organizations. The Grove, 80 miles north of San Francisco, near Monterey on the Russian River, is the scene of 3-week summer encampment closed to all but the members associated and notable guests who cannot be Californians. Former President Dwight D. Eisenhower was a guest at the Grove the first weekend of the year's encampment. After the Republican National Convention picked Goldwater as the party's presidential nominee, Eisenhower witnessed the camp's opening ritual, the cremation of care. A guest last week was Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. He watched the club's Low Jinks show, a musical comedy written and performed by the club members and associates called Damn It, Who Done It? It was a tale of murder in a house of ill repute. Now, hey, wait a minute. You're talking, this is like, yeah, close to the bone for Robert F. Kennedy, is a tale of murder in a house of ill repute. Goldwater will be on hand for a Friday night performance of the hijinks show, the drama titled The Buccaneers, based on Robert Louis Stevenson's tales. In keeping with club custom, Goldwater will be asked to stand up for the lakeside talks to the campers, as Kennedy did last week. A friendly member leaked the report on Kennedy's appearance to Herb Kahn, San Francisco Chronicle columnist. Showing no fear of wild Republicans in their summer lair, Bobby Kennedy delivered a lakeside talk at Bohemian Grove last weekend that won him a rare standing ovation. A lakeside talk by former President Herbert Hoover, a Bohemian Grove member, was a Grove tradition for years until he asked to be excused in 1962 because of his growing years. Goldwater will be a personal guest of retired Army General Albert D. Weidemeyer at the Caveman's camp. The Caveman's is one of the 150 group quarters in the Grove. Each camp group chooses its own members. Herbert Hoover is a caveman's member, as are his sons Herbert Jr. and Alan. Others include radio commentator Lowell Thomas and his son, and Eugene Pulliman, Phoenix, Arizona publisher. Kennedy's host at the Zaka camp was William H. Orrick Jr., San Francisco attorney and present head of the Justice Department Antitrust Division. Zaka was established by the late Templeton Crocker, member of one of the California's wealthiest families. Thomas Fomasser, once the Crocker family's butler and now a professional caterer, handles the staff of Zaka so that the campers are not bothered with the problems of roughing it in the redwoods. The Bohemian Club was organized in 1872, I keep doing that, by a group of newspaper men. Originally, it was open to men who earned their living by letters or the arts. Publishers were banned. The lesson that it took money to operate the club was quickly learned, however, so merchants and business executives were admitted with a vow to observe the club's motto, "Weaving spiders come not here." Originally quartered in rooms over a market at Pine and Kearny Street, the Bohemian Club now is housed in a $1 million building in Post and Taylor Street, opened in 1934. It has about 900 members and a waiting list of about 850. The waiting period for regular membership can run to 15 years. About 100 are professional members who earn their livings in some phase of the arts. Associate members with musical or dramatic ability are recruited to man the club's show production cast. Non-residents and service memberships are offered to armed forces officers and university faculty members, all pledged to abide by the motto, "Weaving spiders come not here." One member said the translation could be, "Don't try any insurance selling or any political campaigning around here." September 28th, the group will spend a day visiting the free centres there and participating in their activities. Is this just, "Oh, we've spiders come not near"? No, this is a different article. Sorry, I was off on that. Just went, whoop, let's go off into this article. Just checking. And so we go a little bit further. We go 10 years on, and we're now coming to a head on this. 1974. These are massively important years, of course. Again, end of Nixon era. Elite flocked to camp to romp in woods. Anyone, Nixon wrote, could aspire to be president of the United States, but only few could aspire to be president of Bohemian Club. By Dak Schreibman. San Francisco Associatedly depressed. A multi-millionaire captain of industries wrestles scenery across the stage. A famous general dusts off light bulbs. A bank president checks the spear he will tote in the evening skit. The scene is the annual 2-week summer encampment at Bohemian Grove, one of America's oldest and most exclusive social events. The first took place in 1880. The gentlemen noted are at play along with some 1,500 others like them, rich, powerful, influential men who serve on the higher echelons of finance, government, politics, business, empire, the arts, and sciences, and the professions. Notice that by this point, 1974, Bohemian Grove, the Bohemians are the very small note in amongst the higher echelons of finance, government, politics, and business empires, and the science. Bohemian Grove, a 2,700-acre collection of I think they've sold off some part of it, a distinctly named rustic camp with facilities to support the greatest men's party on earth, sprawls among the giant redwoods on the edge of the Russian River, 65 miles north of San Francisco. The quote is the name of the recent book by John Vanderzee, who sneaked in as a waiter to secretly gather information on the property, whose entrance bears a sign threatening arrest to the uninvited. Ooh, arrest. I wonder if Alex Jones got arrested. Vanderzee's book and another by G. William Domhoff sparked new interest in the powerful club with roots that go back to San Francisco in the early 1870s. Many people recall Bohemian Grove from 1971 incident involving then President Richard Nixon, member of the Bohemian Club since 1953. Nixon, a resident of the Groves Caveman's Club, was to be off-the-record speaker for the encampment's annual Lakeside Talk. Nelson Rockefeller had given the Lakeside Talk in '63, as did the late President Herbert Hoover 4 years earlier. When word got out that Nixon was going to lose himself in a grove of redwoods to give a confidential talk to some of the most powerful men in America, a flap ensued among White House reporters covering the president. They threatened to cover the event by hook or by crook, and the club's embarrassed leaders asked Nixon to cancel his appearance. The White House announced the cancellation. This is amazing. Nixon period interaction with the press is almost incestuous. They're basically the same entity, constantly offended by each other, constantly battling each other, constantly in bed with each other completely. According to Dornhoff, Nixon in a telegram asked the club president to continue to lead people into the woods and said that he in turn would lead people out of the woods. Anyone, Nixon wrote, could aspire to be the president of the United States, but only a few could aspire to be president of Bohemian Club. The club expects rivalries to be put aside in the encampment. Dornhoff says that in 1970, for instance, the Interior Secretary of State Walter J. Hinkle was a guest of the club member Fred L. Hartley, president of Union Oil. At the time, Hinkle was deep in sensitive negotiations over a disastrous 1969 oil spill in the Santa Barbara Channel. Union spilled the oil. The camp suggests the institution of huge power, despite the fact it originally came about to give men of influence and talent respite from their responsibilities in return to carefree innocence. The midsummer encampments have long been major showcase where leaders of business, industry, education, arts, and politics come to examine each other, said to journalists who tried to cover Rockefeller's Lakeside Talk. The encampment is the major activity of the Bohemian Club, headquartered in San Francisco in the plush confines of a 6-story building, writes Dornhoff. Members eat, drink, gamble, read newspapers, and attend theatricals in 600-seat basement theatre, also used to rehearse encampment productions. The club values its privacy so much that the secretaries and others are instructed not to give the slightest morsel of information to reporters. An employee answering the telephone refused to admit the day of the week to the newsman. It is at these Taylor Street digs where the club's wine committee annually tastes more than 30 wines. Candidates for the 4,000 bottles the committee selects for the encampment, says Dornhoff. But the Grove is the club's reason for being. Encampments begin in mid-July as one plush executive aircraft after another whistles in for the landing at a tiny Sonoma airport. Said Van der Zee, 10, 12, 14 corporate jets at a time in the runway, like units of millionaire squadrons, men almost always 50 years or older, in expensive suits or sports clothes, step down from ramps to be chauffeured to the idyllic hideaways they yearn for the rest of the year. The first important event is the cremation of care, which follows dinner for 1,500 at long tables lit by flaming standards. At the shadows close in from the hillside, there comes the low, sad sounds of funeral dirge, says Dornhoff. As you turn your head in its direction, you faintly see the outlines of men dressed in pointed red hoods and red flowing robes. Then, following the ritual of the symbolic burning of care, translated responsibility, routine, tension, a coffin contains a body of black muslin wrapped around a wooden skeleton, is burnt. The event is one of the Grove's plays, which the memberships take very seriously. They can cost $20,000 to $30,000 to produce, said Dornhoff, and involve casts of unpaid hundreds who perform in dazzling forest productions with lavish scenery and lighting designed and made on the grounds. Other shows featured big names, all members or guests of the members performing without cost. Said Dornhoff, it is here that the members may hear jokes that fellow Bohemians Art Linkletter, Edgar Bergen, and Dan Rowan never tell on television, or enjoy songs that Philip Harris doesn't do in the nightclub scene of Reno and Lake Tahoe. The hosts for the evening may be Ray Bolger or Andy Devine, Bing Crosby another, Dennis Day. For musical members, there's Les Brown or maybe Raymond Hackett or George Shearing. Intellectual stimulation in the form of informal talks at the Grove is reserved for a special meadow where members in years past heard the views of former President Eisenhower before he took office, or for Herman Wouk, Robert Kennedy when he was Attorney General, and Neil Armstrong when he returned from the moon. Membership is by invitation, involves an ordeal of interviews, secret probes, membership polls, and more probing worthy of a full FBI check. Currently, Dornhoff says more than 800 are on the regular membership waiting list, with another 600 on the non-resident waiting list. One man waited 10 years before he was admitted. Amazing. You can see the people, everybody's there, and everything revolves around the Grove by the 70s. This is the biggest. This is no longer about artists and no longer a joke. It doesn't even sound like they're not talking about business anymore. They're meeting up for reasons, and they're doing it hidden away on the Grove. And so then we get to 1977. And we go to the Oakland Tribune in 23rd of July, 1977, and we got the myths and reality of Bohemia. People are asking serious questions. It's entering into the modern day. Everybody's talked about this for long enough. The club, Bohemian. Towels, real linen towels, the restrooms, in the restrooms, a maitre d' who calls you by a name and knows your drink without asking. No waiting for a table or a seat at the bar. These are some of the luxuries of private clubs. But there are other reasons people join such clubs and other types of clubs. In an occasional series, beginning today, the Tribune takes a close look at various clubs and their role in the Bay Area, social, political, cultural, and economic life. Today's articles focus on one of San Francisco's most prestigious men's club, the Bohemian Club. Now, I'm not sure if we're going to read all of this, but we'll see. For a time, Will Rogers was denied membership because members failed to see much humor in his jokes. They finally invited him to join. Former Governor Ronald Reagan, after he left office, sat like other membership candidates with an overcoat in hand, waiting for the rigorous battery of interviews that would spell the difference between acceptance and rejection. The president of one of the world's biggest corporations was passed over 3 years straight to make room for artists with more attractive credentials and more desirable talents. Interesting that. With questions come questions of why they're not returning to the past and how this is different from the past, I'm sure, by this stage. These are some of the stories comfortably couched behind the ivory-covered walls of the Bohemian Club. The two words, to the uninitiated, conjure up notions of rich old men cradled in high-back leather chairs, puffing on cigars and sealing million-dollar business deals over a snifter of brandy. The image may fit some private clubs, but for the Bohemian, it's largely a myth. So are other commonly held beliefs about the closely guarded fellowship. So says Carl Arnold, president of the Bohemian Club, whose headquarters take up nearly a whole city block at Taylor and Post Street in San Francisco. Arnold dispensed with a few myths straight away of 2,000 Bohemians worldwide. Some are young as 22. Aside from well-known or wealthy members of the ranks, are spiced with lesser-known aspiring writers, actors, and artists. Many members are not wealthy and were sought out expressly for other reasons. Some paid little or no membership fee. Interesting that this Carl Arnold, president of the Bohemian Club, is trying to paint this picture by this point, because as you've seen in the previous one, 1974, it's all about influence, it's all about the big dogs, everybody, Kissinger and that lot, all hanging around there, and now they're like, it's hard to shake that, isn't it? The suggestion to the Bohemian as a stereotype of rich man's club, Arnold wagged his head. This is one of the hardest myths to dispel, he said. We make a tremendous effort to be broadly based. We may invite singers to join as associate members for no fee because we need singers that year. We have graduate art student and a custodian of San Francisco Mint as members. By custodian, I mean a janitor. There is constant battle to keep things balanced. Arnold said that power, displaying it and wielding it, is shunned. The club never exercises power. We're called on all the time to do so. We're almost obsessed with keeping it low profile. And business talk, rather than the norm, is staunchly forbidden within Bohemian Club portals. Attesting to that is a Shakespearean-inspired motto carved in the stone outside the clubhouse that warns, "Weaving spiders, come not here." Arnold conceded that business no doubt enters into the conversation at the club, but only as an incidental occurrence. It's considered bad taste to do business here, he said. What happened at the clubhouse and at the Bohemian Grove, the club's 2,700-acre Russian River retreat, is steeped in elaborately contrived blend of tradition, ritual, and mystique that began more than a century ago. "It is a game, a gesture, a midsummer's night dream," wrote Herman Wouk, Pulitzer-winning or prize-winning author and Bohemian. The plumb simple but elusive is abandonment of care and worry. The club began in 1871 when a handful of South Francisco writers and artists would gather for a Sunday breakfast at the home of a newspaper editorial writer, James Bowen. Soon, with intellectual stimulation in a pleasant social setting as it aims, the group organized on a formal basis, limiting membership to artists, actors, writers, and musicians. Regular meetings were staged at the rooms over California Market, shared with a group of newspaper men who dubbed themselves the Jolly Corks. Later, the club admitted only artists, but also men, not only artists, but also men interested in the arts. By 1877, with membership of 750, it moved to formal quarters on Pine Street. In 1934, while the rest of the nation was trudging through Great Depression, the Bohemian Club erected its present clubhouse on Taylor Street, midway between Downton and Nob Hill. The stately 80-story building is the only Class A steel frame structure built in the United States during that period. Private residents from members occupy the top 3 floors of the clubhouse. The floor below, accented by considerable woodwork, occasional marble and thick carpeting, house meeting rooms and studies, private dining rooms, a jocularly decorated bar room, a large dining salon where members meet regularly for lunch, and a library with more than 13,000 volumes, many of them original works of such Bohemians as Mark Twain, Bret Harte, and Jack London. Every room, every piece of available space in the clubhouse is filled with artwork and memorabilia. There are paintings, cartoons, sketches, scriptures, photographs, and bric-a-brac chronicling annals of Bohemia. Each Tuesday night, light entertainment is offered by members in its clubhouse cartoon room, a long bar room whose walls are plastered with cartoons commemorating club antics. Each Thursday night, a more elaborate show is performed in the main dining room. These performances include everything from opera to sports films. Can someone tell your Oakland Tribune that they made a spelling mistake? Rooms on the clubhouse basement floor often are rented to the public for receptions of all kinds. This, save for rare occasions, is as far as women have penetrated the Bohemian Clubhouse, except for the one we talked about earlier. Another special event is the club's Christmas pageant. Members dressed in Renaissance regalia parade through the cavernous dining hall, singing and signalling the beginning of a holiday feast. The same camaraderie, fed by rustic carefree setting, is displayed at Bohemian Grove. Bohemians from throughout the globe congregate here every year for their midsummer's encampment, the painstakingly designed series of plays, ceremonies mixed with spontaneous merriment amid the redwoods. In the play, acting as in other Bohemian Club doings, everyone has to carry a spear. Arnold said, echoing the tenet deeply rooted in Bohemia. General Carlos Romula, elder Philippine statesman, once played a Spanish soldier. The president of Harvard University moved a piano. Plastic surgeons are our makeup artists. Other things about Bohemian Club are as impressive a yearly payroll for staff that tops $1 million. A chorus and full symphony orchestra, each with 60-member performers, 15 grand pianos at the clubhouse, and 60 or 70 more at the Grove, and a fully equipped clubhouse theatre where the members present Grove plays and other entertainment. It was here, as the stage was beginning readied for the weekly Thursday night offering, that Carl Arnold explained why the Bohemian Club had flourished while other clubs had tried and failed. "It is the dedication of all the members," he said confidently. "As long as it continues, I don't think the club will ever die." Well, it depends. And they say tomorrow inside the club. So this is probably, so this is the same article as I was just reading. I've opened up in another tab. And here you go. There's their Bohemian Club there. Pass through the portal and no business talk. Go through the door. That's their little door. Look at this slant on this road. That's one hell of a slant, isn't it? San Francisco is one hell of an interesting place sometimes. So we're not going to... I'm tempted to go a little bit further and go into the next episode of that, but we have got a lot to go through, and we have looked a lot inside Bohemian Grove, like more than the next article can say. I can promise you. I'm going to close some of these. Some of these articles will tell you a load of things about Bohemian Grove that we've now already gone through. So there's by this point, by the 70s, there's nothing they can really tell us that we don't already know from the other articles that I've read. So we don't really need to go into that. But what we do need to see is how in 1977, the same year, the Orlando Sentinel is starting to ask questions from the New York Times Dispatch, as written at the top. So they're not the ones asking the questions, but at least they're actually reporting this. But as you see up here, Gerald Ford, going into office, Henry Kissinger just come out of office, Bing Crosby hanging around, Phil Harris. These are the big players. A Bohemian camp for men of class. And this is them again. This is like shock coming in. People are seeing again over and over again. Look at these guys. Look at what they're doing. They're completely and utterly like doing stuff off in this retreat, and we don't know what it is. So let's just look at it with amazement, and we'll see some more names here. Monte Rio, California. When Gerald R. Ford, Henry A. Kissinger, and A.W. Clausen joined 2,000 of the richest and most powerful men in the country at the annual ritual known as the Summer Encampment at Bohemian Grove, near this sleepy hamlet of 997 last month, did they make the decision that will shape America's destiny, or was it merely the greatest men's party on earth? No one saying for the record. The camp, 65 miles north of San Francisco, operates very much on the tradition of Mark Twain's Blood Brothers on the Mississippi, or a college secret society, but two consistently anonymous sources have disclosed that William Buckley played back on an outdoor piano, while a New York cocktail pianist, George Thayer, played Mendelssohn Concerto instead of the Putin on the Ritz. The best of traditional postprandial lakeside talks was given by former California Governor Edmund G. Pat Brown, who spoke on the history of the state water problems and the creation of such programs in the Central Valley Project. Former President Ford told us what he would do to save the century. How, to be quite frank, replied the Bohemian Club member who had disclosed that Ford had spoken, he put me to sleep. How he put me to sleep. John Mosca of San Francisco's Steinhardt Aquarium gave a popular talk about certain species of fish found off the Galapagos Islands that can change their sex in order to survive. Kissinger surprised everyone. He did not speak, although he did spend time chatting with the members and the 200 guests. The number is strictly limited, about all manners of topics. I never liked Kissinger when he was in office, said one guest, but he was perfectly charming when we talked about music and the Kennedy Center for a long time. It was all, if it all sounds eclectic, it is. For 3 weekends every summer, this was the 99th. The club's nearly 2,000 members and their guests, most of them business and political leaders, joined educators, scientists, go on, we'd say it all. We're going to say it all. Scientists, artists, and entertainers at this retreat in the Redwood Grove on the winding Russian River. They come by limousine through the woods or by corporate jets to the tiny Sonoma airport, where they are met by waiting cars. The club motto, "Weaving spiders come not here," is a warning to leave the talk of business and world affairs of home and turn one's mind to the matter of arts and leisure. This summer, for example, attendees saw the several plays. In one, The El Dorado, if viewers look closely, they would see two of the big actors appearing as dock workers were Caspar Weinberger, former Secretary of Health, Education and Welfare, who is now Chief Counsel of the Bechtel Corp, and Clausen, President of and Chief Executive Officer of the Bank of America. The play, about greedy gold miners who came to California during the middle 1800s and kicked the Spaniards off their land, was written by Lou Felder, a Bohemian Club member who plays a fraudulent consumer advocate in the new TV show Fernwood Tonight. Those who attended included Art Linkletter, who was a master of ceremonies for one of the shows, Bing Crosby and Phil Harris. Among the entertainers, Robert Aboud, Edgar F. Kaiser Sr. of Kaiser Industries, Richard Cooley, former president of Wells Fargo Bank, Alan Sproul, former head of Federal Reserve Bank of New York, Emmett Solomon, former president of Crocker Citizens National Bank, and Louis B. Lundberg, retired chairman of Bank of America. Amazing. Participants drank 4,000 bottles of wine, carefully chosen, and almost as much liquor. Despite the special Bohemian Club labels, the bourbon was really Jim Beam, and the gin really Beefeaters. They played golf, swam, and went skeet shooting, and they all sat around the lavish dinner circle, feasting on lamb, salmon, steaks, and assorted delicacies each night. In years past, speakers at the Lakeside Chats have included Dwight D. Eisenhower before he was president, Robert F. Kennedy when he was Attorney General, Arnold Palmer, the golfer. Arnold Palmer, the golfer, who George Hutton in Hartford wanted to pick up as golfer for Paradise Island about 15 years before this was written, or 20 years before this was written. Nelson A. Rockefeller, former Chief Justice Earl Warren, there as well. David Sarnoff, former chairman of RCA. Herman Walk, the writer. Dr. Werner von Braun, the space program. Neil Armstrong, the astronaut. Richard M. Nixon, who is a club member, and Kissinger. One of the speakers this year was Defense Secretary Harold Brown. Who are the members and how do they join the club? Whose reasons for being is the summer encampment? There is at least one officer or director from 40 of the 50 largest industrial corporations in the country, and an officer or director of 20 of the top 25 banks in the country. According to G. Williams Dunhoff, author of Bohemian Grove, a study in the ruling class cohesiveness. And they are leaders in communications, academic and art world. Senator Charles Percy are the third. William Buckley, Bing Crosby, Phil Harris, William Randolph Hearst Jr. Belong, as do the presidents of Wells Fargo Bank, First National Bank of Chicago, the Southern Pacific Railway, Los Angeles Times, Pacific Gas, Electric, Levi Strauss, Stanford University, and the University of California, amongst others. Membership in the Bohemian Club is by invitation only, and no women are allowed, either as members of the club, except for an occasional picnic for club wives. That's a change now. They're trying to loosen it up and lighten it up, but it's always been anti-women. This will come round to roost. Come home to roost. You don't mess around with women all day. It'll come home to roost. After being nominated by 2 sponsorships, a prospective member must fill out an application form that puts Federal Bureau investigation checks to shame. He must include the names of business or professional connections, wife's maiden name, and musical, oratorical, literary, artistic, or historical talents. If 9 of the 11 men of the membership committee favour the candidate, he may be admitted upon a membership of $2,500 initiation fee and monthly dues of $41. If he fails, he must wait 3 years to try again. More than 1,500 people are on the waiting list, and one man waited 10 years before becoming a member. Just checking if that was anything to do with it. That wasn't. It's a separate article there. As you see, there's a Dirty Kissinger. I just want to mention the Dirty Kissinger there. Look at him, Dirty Kissinger. Very interesting article, that. Okay, we haven't got much to go now, honest. Okay, and we're going to start to look at the articles that by 1980, the whole image of it was coming free. The Billings Gazette. This is a few months after my birth. I was born in April 1980, so this is 1980. San Francisco. Weaving spiders and women are equally unwelcome at San Francisco's Bohemian Club. A group so dedicatedly male that allegedly even the presence of a waitress would destroy the intimate atmosphere of some of the nation's most powerful men skipping around nude in a wood nymph's costume. I'm not sure if you're skipping around nude in a wood nymph's costume. There's a word I can't see there. Or in a wood nymph's costume. I don't want to think about that with Kissinger. The mere idea of the female intrusion brought club members like former Governor Edmund G. Brown and columnist William F. Buckley hurrying to testify on behalf of the club, which, to its evident outrage, has found itself the target of sex discrimination suit brought by the state's Department of Fair Employment and Housing. The 100-year-old club, which has 2,000 members, many of them prominent in the world of business and politics, cherishes the concept that its charm derives from its exclusive male companionship at its club location in downtown San Francisco and at the Summers encampment in Bohemian Grove on the Russian River. Its motto, "Weaving spiders come not here," refers to the fact that the club is devoted to pleasure and conviviality. According to the former Governor Brown, who's been attended Bohemian Club events for more than 30 years. But California law is more restrictive than federal law, which permits exemptions for purely social, non-profit, and fraternal clubs from regulations regarding equal employment opportunities. According to Robert Barnes, counsel for the Fair Employment Agency in Sacramento, the Bohemian Club has become the focus of potentially precedent-setting case hinging on whether private clubs may be subject to state as well as federal law, and whether, in this case, the state government is usurping the United States Supreme Court. Del Fuller, the San Francisco attorney who is secretary of the Bohemian Club, contended, "What we are saying is that there is constitutionally recognized right of association and privacy, and in other cases the US Supreme Court has said that for social purposes people can associate with anyone they want and the state may not interfere." It was not, insisted Fuller, a question of men versus women, as he explained it. When you have a group exclusively of one sex and you introduce another, then you change the social dynamic. In this case, we feel that women would impact on the basic social activity. At issue is not whether women should be present socially, but whether they should be hired as waitresses or even parking attendants. Club members like Brown and Buckley explained at state hearings before Judge Robert S. Kendall in San Francisco this week why they felt that the mere presence of the opposite sex, even in the capacity of servants, would, as Buckley put it, dilute the consistency we are addressing and affect the nature of the whole experience. The conservative columnist said the annual 17 days spent solely in male company at the club's 280 acres register with unique regenerative experience and shared sense of fraternal loyalty. Both Buckley and Brown recited an excerpt from the club's brochure in which members are described as sitting around in rough clothes, listening to improvised music and drinking booze. Men can decently love each other and women cannot understand. Brown said he thought having women around in any capacity would destroy the club atmosphere. True enough. When women are around, men tend to be more genteel. They don't have the same relaxation they do in this temporary world of men. Which I might say, I would not enjoy, generally speaking. He explained. I am not at all anti-female, emphasized the former governor, but there is a feeling that when you arrive at the Grove, you are leaving behind something, and as soon as you go through the gate, a subtle change takes place. The activities at Bohemian Grove include the presentation of plays in which female roles are played by men. As in the case of Fuller, who testified that he played the role of a wood nymph wearing a body stocking with wings attached at one of the club shows. If you're wearing a body stocking, you're still not nude. So, anyway. According to Fuller's testimony, it can all get very, very boisterous, with running musical accompaniment from jug band, a washboard trio, a wind ensemble, a jazz group, a string quartet, and a full symphony. It can also, from all accounts, get quite unhindered. I always get a problem with this word. Here we go. Uninhibited. Uninhibited, with members disporting themselves in the nude when they exchanged the boardroom for the Grove's Redwoods. Buckley said he had seen people nude at the Grove summer encampment, but suggested that was one of the indications of how totally relaxed the activities were. I have, he said, never seen a streaker at Bohemian Club. The case is now under advisement, and even if the judge's ruling upholds the charges that the Bohemian Club is guilty of sexual discrimination contrary to state law, the matter is likely to be appealed. Probably all the way, given some of the people involved, as one state official puts it. Meanwhile, the judge has enjoined against any publicizing of photographs of Bohemian Club members in the course of enjoying themselves at the summer outings, especially when they're playing women roles. Okay, and now we are definitely getting to the end. So, with 1982, obviously, there's loads of questions, court cases. People are saying, no, this isn't sexual equality. What are you doing? These people are they're taking the piss. So West German Chancellor picketed during U.S. visit. Guerneville, California. West German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt was whisked past crowds of protesters Friday as he began a weekend visit to secretive summer camp with some of the world's most powerful men. The camp, known as Bohemian Grove, is the site of a 17-day meeting of members of the Bohemian Club, an all-male group of business and political leaders based in San Francisco. About 100 people picketing against the Bohemian Club were held back by California Highway Patrol officers as Schmidt's motorcade sped into the club's tightly guarded 2,700-acre estate beneath the redwood trees. Along the Russian River, an estimated 2,000 men were expected during this year's event, which included recreational activities not open to the public. Schmidt will be at the camp only for the weekend, as a guest of Secretary of State George Shultz. It is Schmidt's second visit to Bohemian Grove. Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and FBI Director William Webster are scheduled to make off-the-record talks to Bohemians, said Gene Bowles, spokesman for Bohemian Grove Action Network, a coalition of 57 peace, political, environmental, and feminist groups. The coalition led the protests as Schmidt arrived. Club members included Ronald Reagan, Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger, former Presidents Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford, Attorney General William French Smith, and Vice President George Bush. Every Republican president since Herbert Hoover has attended the summer encampment, although Ronald Reagan did not plan to attend this year's meet. Some of the pickets carried signs. One read, "Herr Schmidt, please say nicht to Reagan." Another said, "No war." On Thursday, Schmidt, in his 5th visit to North California, said the United States would attack budget deficits and high interest rates to steer the world economy from looming depression. After his weekend in the woods, Schmidt will again be Schultz house guest in Palo Alto before flying to Vancouver, British Columbia. So, Monday night. Here you go. The Macon News of 1982 tells a different story. People picketing the event. They're outside. They're saying no to war with Reagan. They're not a good welcome for the German Chancellor, who's visiting for the Bohemian Club for the second time, going to the Grove for the second time, and they're still Kissinger's going to be making his speeches, and the FBI Director William Webster. So obviously, this has become a really event that leaves a bad taste in its mouth. And this signifies the end, really, of Bohemian Groves' peak. It still goes on, and it's still doing the same thing, but this starts to get to an end. We'll go to 1987 now. California goes after exclusive men club for discrimination. Again, 7 years after the first case, the same reporting, Scripps Howard's news service, are reporting via Thomas D. Elias. Los Angeles. Strong efforts are underway in California to punish some of America's most exclusive private clubs because they still discriminatory membership policies. The attack of the clubs by state and city officials targets the tax deductibility and liquor licenses, as well as threatening some government businesses conducted with companies that employ members. So now they're targeting the actual people who are employing the members of this group, and the licenses that are involved in this group having their activity. Among the groups affected in San Francisco's famed Bohemian Club, whose membership includes President Reagan, Vice President George Bush, Secretary of State George Shultz, and Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger. So by 1987, four of the most powerful people in the government are all Bohemian Club members, and now it looks like it's a government club, doesn't it? So people are bound to be going because the truth is out. And the thing that starts to bring this Bohemian dream to an end is the press. Is the press not being allowed in to an institution that was created by a bunch of pressmen in a newspaper office? And the same question at the start you would see was, but why are women not allowed in? And the question by the end is, why are women not allowed in? Over 100 years, they survived with these two main contradictions, these main, very, very big contradictions that have never been resolved in the whole time. And 100 years later, 1987, over 100 years after its creation, a century has passed, and they've still got the same problem. It's the government's club, and they're still not allowing in the girl. Now, men should have men's clubs. Of course. Women should have women's clubs. I don't want to be hanging around a women's club. That's the opposite way to how society drives itself. And we see this within the transgender debate now, where this whole new selection of genders is being created and shoved in everybody's faces and shoved in every direction. You can go into women's sports. You can do women's stuff. You could do men's stuff now. Everybody can just go, and everybody gets upset by it because people want a little bit of fucking privacy. That's how it works. That's how it works. They want privacy, often from the stresses of the other sex. That's the same for women as for men. I don't think the tax question should have much impact, says Bohemian Club General Manager Anthony Pels. But the liquor license, that's a different story. Opening the newest round of attacks on the discriminatory clubs was the California Franchise Tax Board, which has adopted regulation barring state tax deductions for any meals bought at the clubs whose membership policies discriminate on the basis of race, religion, or sex. Next has come a legal opinion by California Attorney General John Van de Kamp, a Democrat, who has ruled for the first time a State Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control can revoke liquor licenses from clubs that discriminate. Now, city councils in both Los Angeles and San Francisco are considering anti-apartheid-like ordinances that would forbid the cities from doing business with firms that reimburse employees for dues or meal expenses at clubs that discriminate. New York and Philadelphia already have similar laws. The Los Angeles ordinance is stalled in committee, but passage seems likely for the San Francisco measure, which targets not only Bohemian Club, but the equally exclusive Pacific Union Club, mentioned in the article in 1895 by Alice Ricks, the Olympic Club, and at least 3 others that bar women. We are concerned, says Harry Scott, the Bohemian Club president. I don't know how it will turn out. Added a Pacific Union Club member. Our club is limited in size, and we believe we have the right to free association. The clubs are clearly more worried about the possible loss of liquor licenses than any other sanction. That would be very important to us, says Scott. We don't think the ruling is legal, and I'm sure that the clubs would appeal, but it would be a tough one if upheld. We still would be very unlikely to change our rules, but we'd obviously have to figure out some other way around it. Other clubs refused comment, with General Manager Harry Richter of Los Angeles' posh and stately California Club, members include Weinberger and former Attorney General William French Smith, hanging up on reporters when asked for a reaction. We simply can't ask taxpayers to subsidize discrimination in any form, says California State Controller Gray Davis, a Democrat and member of the tax board, which voted to lift clubs' deductibility. It's not right for the taxpayers, mostly people who aren't allowed to join, to help foot a bill for these places. San Francisco's city attorney, Louise Rene, who drafted her city's proposed anti-discrimination law, said the clubs really make me very angry. Poor girl. She pointed out to San Francisco Mayor Dianne Feinstein not only cannot become a member, but can't even be invited to events at the men's clubs, and that Los Angeles Mayor Tom Bradley had been barred from membership in some clubs because he's black. The idea that a mayor of a major city, whether it be in San Francisco or Los Angeles, cannot be invited to an event because of sex or race is simply outrageous, says Rene. Now, this is what a lot of, I mean, if you're going to try and go at the sex angle, okay, go at the sex angle, but then just to merge in, and then this black man got discriminated by someone else, and so if you're going to discriminate on sex or race, mixing and convoluting sex or race has the same dynamic, which, again, is just like, it's what people do when they want something their way and they can't get it by a proper means. They lie and they make things up and they change things. But California governor George Dugmayan, a Republican, said private clubs should be permitted to decide for themselves who may join. His administration can veto the new tax board regulations, but has no authority to overturn liquor license rules. These are decisions that are up to the people who have organized these clubs, Dugmayan says, while allowing that it would be a bad idea for clubs to begin admitting women. It wouldn't be a bad idea for the clubs to admit women. Sorry, the opposite. One Bohemian Club member said that it would be awkward and cumbersome and complicated for his club to admit women. He said the club has 2,300 members and is waiting a list of 3,000 men, each of whom has been proposed for membership by at least 2 current members. It takes between 6 and 15 years to get in, he said. Although the preferential members have allowed such figures as former Presidents Dwight Eisenhower and Richard Nixon and former Chief Justice Earl Warren to join on shorter notice. Other clubs, however, have much shorter waiting lists. These clubs are remnants of the 19th century caste system based in the entrenched wealth and privilege, said Van der Kamp, noting that the membership in some clubs can cost more than $10,000 a year. These are offensive anachronisms in the 20th century. Like centuries matter. But the Bohemian Club Scott, a steamship agent, predicts his club and others will survive in their present form no matter what. We've been a gentleman's club since 1872. Again, they did it. He said, we believe you cannot just make everything public. If everyone could join, there would be no point in having a club. It would be a restaurant or something. We might lose a small percentage of our members if that measure pass and are upheld, but I doubt that many of our members either write off their dues or have their companies reimburse it. So I think we'd lose only a very small percentage of our members. But Frederick Ruscha, a lawyer for Los Angeles-based Center of Law and Public Interest, predicted that disallowing deductions would force clubs to change their policies or the members will take their business elsewhere. Alcoholic beverage control officials said they'll begin examining membership policies of the private clubs the same way that they now investigate employment policies of other liquor license holders. We think all our licensees should play by the same rules. Licensees should play by the same rules, says Manuel Espinoza, state liquor agency official. Interesting. The Lompoc record, yet unreasonably California goes after exclusive men's clubs for discrimination. The clubs are clearly more worried about the possible loss of liquor licenses and others. So they're looking for other ways to take down this club. And, it's not going to work, of course. So by 1991, you've still got John Murray of the Cox News Service asking the same questions. Now, this is a really interesting article. We've only got a couple of articles left. It's a really interesting one. Monterey, California. The movies of Monterey Theater, where you cross the bridge over the Russian River, is City Slickers. If they had planned it, which I doubt, they couldn't have planned it better. I'm here during the 2 weeks the Bohemian Club holds its annual frolic in the club's 2,700-acre preserve here in the mountains and valleys of northern California, 100 miles or so north of San Francisco. Henry Kissinger is here, somewhere out there in the woods. So is George Shultz. Ronald Reagan is a maybe. It's hard to say. Well, by 1991, when he's up here, Ronald Reagan might be wandering around not knowing what his name is, so... I know that much because I read it in the newspaper. How the rich and powerful come together for 2 weeks at Bohemian Grove to run naked in the woods. That last part I didn't read in the newspaper, but I read it somewhere. No, it was in the newspaper. I just read it. Spy magazine, I think. Actually, nobody outside the Bohemian Club knows what they do inside Bohemian Grove. It's a big secret for big boys. I don't qualify for admittance. I meet only 1/3 of the qualifications. I'm not rich. I'm not powerful. I am a male. It's the kind of deal, the boys' night out in the woods for 2 weeks. If you've never heard of the Bohemian Club, you haven't been paying good attention. Former President Herbert Hoover, you remember, called it the greatest men's party on earth. The club's motto is weaving spiders, come not here. That means the club has a rule against talking business. Their totem is an owl because the owl has wisdom, strength, and ability to maneuver without being seen. I got that from Gabrielle got that from a friend who works inside Bohemian Grove, a person the outsider called Boho or Boho-ho. Gabrielle won't tell me his friend's name. I don't want to get him shot. Gabrielle, who I've met near the bridge not far from the Pink Elephant Bar, is what we used to call a bohemian. He wears old clothes, a fine full beard, and a faded fedora. He is carrying a Sony 19-inch TV under his arm, a portable model. Gabrielle, 44, is telling me about the Bohemian Club. His friends, Vicky, 28, and Robin, 41, are telling me that Gabrielle knows what he's talking about. Robin, incidentally, is carrying a blanket and a pillow. I ask him why. He says that they belong to Gabrielle. Robin is carrying the blanket and pillow so that Gabrielle can carry the TV. Makes sense. Vicky is carrying on. Gabrielle was among last week's protesters. Half a dozen or so were arrested for blocking the road, but not Gabrielle. He says all he did was stand around and smoke a joint. He says it made him feel a lot better. Robin says he quit protesting in protest. That's because of all the professional protesters who come here now. People who will protest anything. It isn't the idea of Henry Kissinger and the boys running naked in the woods that they're against. In between such romps, the protesters believe that Bohemian Club is plotting against the people. You know what? You want to know where world policy is made, said Vicky? Right here, during these 2 weeks. Yeah, says Robin. You don't think they ain't got telephones to where they gotta go? You bet they do. Who owns the place, says Vicky. When I ask her who owns the place, they own it. They don't have to tell me who they is. Yeah, they do, says Gabrielle, setting down his TV on the bridge railing. Can you float the river? Can you float the river? And you can float the river and you can fish the river because they can't block off the river. This is America, and you can't do that. Yeah, says Robin, still holding the blanket and pillow, even though Gabrielle has set down the TV. But don't try to stop along the bank on their land. If you do, then you're going to have a Russian Kalashnikov stuck in your face. Robin says he believes the Bohemian Club is a bunch of communists. I had read the newspaper that some of the protests here last week were shouting, "Die, you Nazi scum." I read, too, that the club spokesman said that there are a lot of misconceptions about the Bohemian Club and that 2,300 members include people from all walks of life. Maybe so. So this strange article in the South Bend Tribune in 1999, called "So What's Really Going On Inside Bohemian Grove," is a propaganda attempt to make it look like anybody who says these and protests Bohemian Groves and says things against them don't know what they're talking about, are carrying their goods under their arm because they're basically homeless and don't have a clue who are actually there and what's going on, and see them as people who are taking over the world. That's because by this point, that's what everybody's thinking. And so they're pointing out that, but saying, look how mad these people who think that are. Yet that's what's going on there. So by this point, they're trying to make you think you're mad for talking about Bohemian Grove, for protesting Bohemian Grove, for asking what goes on behind closed doors with all the world leaders and these massive intelligence chiefs and all these other peoples are. Well, what's happening behind there? Why are they without more scrutiny? Well, you're an idiot, homeless person who doesn't know anything, and basically will have to have someone carry a blanket for you because you're such an idiot if you ask questions like that. That's what they wanted to create. So that's 1991. And there, 1993, we're going to go to what is the Casper Star Tribune in Casper, Wyoming, for this short article. So we are very nearly done. There's only one more after this. Gergen to resign from all-male Bohemian Club. Washington, Associated Press. In an abrupt reversal, new presidential counselor David Gergen is resigning from the secretive all-male Bohemian Club, the White House announced Thursday. Press Secretary D.D. Myers insisted the move had nothing to do with the recent controversy over Gergen's membership in the exclusive club, drawing a barrage of skeptical questions at the daily White House briefing. Myers says Gergen was resigning from all boards, commissions, organizations, and social groups to which he belongs, in keeping with the White House tradition, which isn't true because everybody in the White House was members of Bohemian Grove, which we've seen in that before. She said many White House staff members dropped out of all organizations to avoid even appearance of impropriety in the future. Gergen decided it was in his interests and in the White House interests that he do that. It was not a decision made specifically in reference to any organization. Gergen's membership in the all-male club, all-male still mentioned over and over again, had been a point of controversy since his first day on the job Monday, when he insisted, "I have no intentions to resign." Myers, however, said Gergen had always intended to review his membership in various organizations. So he lied then to the press, but not now. And again, it's still the press, the people who created it. Really, the type of people who created it were the ones who were trying to bring it down. She teasingly, it's just so ironic. I'm not saying that because I want Bohemian Grove to say, I'm saying it because it's so ironic. This is so ironic. It's full of irony. She teasingly slipped the Bohemian Club into a long list of groups from which Gergen was resigning, stringing out the announcement with a series of cautionary phrases. Mr. Gergen is going to resign from a variety of, well, wait a second, here it is. Now, don't be jumping to any conclusions here, but non-profit boards, public policy and social organizations, commissions, study groups, including the American Committee on Aid to Poland, the American Assembly, the Aspen Institute, the Bohemian Club popped 12th on the list. Ah, the reporter exclaimed. The announcement produced the most lively exchange in the news briefing that also covered Clinton's deficit reduction plan, the Supreme Court vacancy, violence in Somalia, and the possible summit meeting with Russian President Boris Yeltsin. Clearly tired of the preoccupation with the Bohemian Grove, Myers at one point pleaded, I know this is very interesting issue to all of you guys, but you know, that's a brilliant. I love it. That's a brilliant article. Right. So one more. Not much. Problems played in nominations. So this talks about, and I'm not going to read all of this. Yes, I am. Why am I lying? By Kirk Ladendorf, American Statesman staff. So prepare, sit in. This is the last 5 minutes you got to put up with me reading any of these articles. When Bob Inman bowed out as nominee for Secretary of Defense, he told the president in the January 8th letter that he was unwilling to be subject to distortion of my record, my character, my reputation. Inman was objecting to criticism by several nationally syndicated newspaper columnists of his belated payment of $6,000 in Social Security taxes for long-time Austin housekeeper and his role in the ill-fated 1988 leveraged buyout of Tracor Inc., the Austin defense contractor that later reorganized the U.S. bankruptcy court. His role in Nannygate, he said Tuesday, was not in failing to follow the law, but in failing to give his housekeeper the assistance and guidance she needed so she could properly pay her taxes. Inman said his role in the Tracor takeover has been fairly reported, but unfairly characterized in some accounts. He also disclosed Tuesday that he's a member of the all-male Bohemian Club, which he said was sure to come out during Senate confirmation hearings. He is looking at each of those issues, Nannygate. So each of the issues. So we won't go over Nannygate and we won't go over Tracor, but we will go over the question of Inman's involvement in Bohemian Club. Bohemian Club, Inman acknowledged Tuesday that there was one other area of controversy that probably would have surfaced during confirmation hearings. He said several colleagues encouraged him to drop his membership in the Bohemian Club, an all-male club where some of the nation's richest and most powerful men attend an annual Bohemian Grove encampment among the redwoods north of San Francisco, 65 miles north. Inman said he stubbornly resisted resigning from the club because I didn't want to be put to the litmus test of my support for women and women's issues. He noted that he had promoted women to top posts in the intelligence community. I didn't join the Bohemian Club because it restricted women. I joined it in spite of, because of. I love the exposure to people who are talented in the arts that I didn't get in other places. Inman concluded that perhaps he is too thin-skinned to endure the public scrutiny, criticism in the press, and partisan political attacks that seem to come with having a powerful Washington job. And that was from the Austin American Statement in a title about Bob Inman, Problems Played Inman Nomination. And that is very interesting. Aye, good madam, there's a rub, a man club, let's say, as he pleases and privileged to die for. I am thinking that one really gets at home. But you, dear married lady, have your small suspicions. I would not believe for small suspicions. I would not believe for so simple a reason that this man seeks a club he calls his own. 1895, Alice Ricks, amazing article, The Owl and the Mortarboard. Of course, it's a lot more of ironic and a joke. Kind of like Bohemian Grove. Right, I don't know how long that was. That was probably about 2.5 hours, I would think. And I'm sorry if that went on for a long time, but to understand the beginning of Bohemian Grove to the end of Bohemian Grove, you have to go through all of Bohemian Grove. And what happened to Bohemian Grove? Well, a bunch of guys who ran newspapers, who were newspaper men, decided to create a place where rich newspaper men and their friends could go, and they could encourage loads of people for the arts and other things to go and watch poetry and go and watch plays and all these different types of things. And it worked out really well, and everybody wanted to be a member. Before you knew it, it went out of control. But then they started letting in people who could could pay the bills, because they started having trouble. You know, their building burnt down, they lost their mummy and had to replace it with a second mummy. So you know, when someone's in need of mummified remains, they obviously need to be able to get in someone who can pay the rent, and that's what they did. They brought in a load of people who were powerful, and that power kept going out and going out. And obviously, by 1895, it was all very obvious that the power was there and was getting bigger and fuller. And the reports were slim early on. Talk about Bohemian Grove as this club for people who are, but mainly it's just Bohemians, and that's not what it was. And by the time you see post World War II, you see that suddenly all of these powerful men, look, this is a place where powerful people, and also actors and Bohemians go there. And then it was, all of the powerful men are there, and they're all here at a time when they're manipulating the world, and they're all in one place. And then the protests begin, and the protests are nearly all about it being an all-male club, which kind of resonates from what originally the original criticisms of it were, and for it being so powerful and you know, not knowing what's going on behind closed door, all of these different things. It had the same problems functionally at the start as later, but as the anger in feminist groups and others and people searching for equal rights, as their movements progressed through the next century, so did the way they looked at Bohemian Grove. So by the time Alex Jones is creeping through the woods and about to expose Bohemian Grove, everybody knows what Bohemian Grove is. And it was only a matter of time before someone did that. And the internet had a perfect idea. And maybe it was like done so that people could see that behind the curtain, it was still going on. Because they wanted people to understand that there was a curtain. The part of the thing of Bohemian Grove was for years and years, look, there's a curtain. And the people behind the curtain are there, and you're over here. And that's kind of how it continued. But eventually that had to change. And nowadays, you don't hear about Bohemian Grove mentioned that much, do you? Bet it still goes on. Bet it still goes on. It's got so much money, why wouldn't it? Now, what happened in the 90s, the 80s, it became toxic. From 1980, from 1977, it started happening. The protests were happening outside Bohemian Grove. It was a great place for great place for what that one article tried to turn professional protesters through the mouth of an imaginary homeless protester, like you know, these professional protesters. That was obviously there to give you a false image of why people didn't like Bohemian Grove and make you think that it was some sort of conspiracy. But a load of rich men who are really elites connecting in the woods, so later on that they can talk to each other outside the woods about foreign policy and stuff behind closed doors. That's what it was about. Influence. And influence is really easy to understand. It's not a conspiracy. It doesn't matter what happened there. They could all go and leave, you know, spiders weave not wheel webs here or whatever. They all go away and not have conversations about this, but they meet each other. That's what it was for. It's a connection. It's for connections to the most powerful people who can then do things behind closed doors. And that is worrying for lots of people. Now, by the end of it, the best way to attack it was either through liquor licenses or through feminism. And those two things is what they tried. And the weirdest thing is that the conflict at the end came from the press. The last 30 years of the articles I went through, the press was so very angry with what happened. With this being locked out of an organization that they felt they had created as well. Some of them felt they had created, and they had created. So there you go. I don't think that I've watched a couple of things on Bohemian Grove, but I don't think that there's any better way to discover what Bohemian Grove is than going through 100 years of history from the mid 1890s to the mid 1990s. And seeing how it changed and how it was feared and how it was honored, how it was seen, and who ended up being involved in it. I don't think an organization like that can become that powerful again unless it is a prevailing world order and they just don't care. And that's what we got. So Bohemian Grove should keep going, but they'll never be quite at the same point they were before. But it is, don't get wrong. It's a strategy for connecting really powerful people with each other. It's not conspiracy. That's not conspiracy. Really powerful people connect, and then they do things behind the scenes. Yeah, that's how all corruption works. So I'm going to go now and leave you be. Get out of the Bohemian Grove mindset, and I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it was informative for you. This is NEWSHOUND. This has been episode 18 of NEWSHOUND, and I really need your support to make long pieces of work, massive articles that are really heavily researched, and along with all of the other things that I do. I need your help to keep doing that. So I ask if you can go to one of the sites I have and donate a little bit towards me, so I can my work, so that I can keep going along this path and keep putting out such a massive amount of content that is really well researched. I'm going to need your help for that. So that's the only thing I say. You go to fungymonkey.com and johnnyvedmore.com, and there's a new site coming soon. It's already partially up, but it'll be announced in a couple of days' time properly, and that it will be a way for people to support more than just me, a collection of people too. So I really hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for joining me on this NEWSHOUND.
Young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets.